Hello, you are looking live at IB Nation Sports Talk. How we doing tonight? Hope you're having a good one with Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. As we roll in to Thursday, we have got, about 36 hours or so, something like that, give or take. A little more than 36 hours, I guess, until Notre Dame and NC State kickoff. Don't forget, of course, this weekend, the IB Countdown to Kickoff pod. We're actually going to drop that since it's a noon kickoff Saturday. We're going to drop it a little earlier than usual. We're going to drop it Friday night. So Countdown to Kickoff, both the YouTube and the podcast version will drop Friday night for your listening and viewing pleasure. How you doing, Jesse?
I'm doing actually really well. Had my last fantasy football draft last night. League I commissioned. You play in. Have a bunch of friends that play in it as well. And I was sandwiched. I don't know if you know this, but last night I was sandwiched by like two of my best friends. So I picked third. My other good friend picked second. Then my other good friend picked fourth. And the amount of FU texts I got last night was pretty substantial. So that was fun.
That's what happens. I wished that I could F you a few people. It's like, how many times? It's like you're eyeballing a guy. He's falling. 3 more picks. Boom. He's gone now, And, so I wanted to throw those out to a few people, but I held off. So.
But then today was a good day of work. I always get sushi from my favorite sushi place at work, so that was good for lunch today. And then obviously tonight is the wait is over, the drought is over. We get some NFL football, so fired up for that too. And I'm 4 wins away from the Cubs being at 80 wins, so it's panning out to be a good
win some
weekend.
Cash on that. Does it have to be 80, or do you need 81 to actually win the money?
80 plus, so okay. 80 on the dot. I mean, I told someone the other day, not to get cocky, but at this point it's not a matter of if, it's relatively going to be a matter of when at this point. So I'm hoping it's this weekend. Extra sweet.
Tyler asking who we picked. I had the number 1 pick. I got Justin Jefferson. I ended up, I was pretty happy with my team.
You drafted well last night.
I thought I did. I
had the number 3 pick, and Chase went second. So I was strong-armed into having to take Christian McCaffrey. And I'm not a fan of going running back, but I did it. And I think it's the first time I ever did it. I went Christian McCaffrey and then Josh Jacobs. So we'll see how it goes.
I'm old school fantasy football. I've been my first 2 years playing fantasy football. I drafted Barry Sanders and Emmitt Smith as rookie running backs.
Oof.
So that's how long it's been. It's been a little while.
Back when you had to actually keep track on like a piece of paper of who was gone and
that's right.
What your rankings were. There was more work that went into it.
Exactly. There were no websites and all that kind of stuff. Our guy, the first time we played the commish, he had these sheets of paper and we had to fill out a sheet of paper and hand him in our lineup before the game started and all that stuff. And there was always people accusing other people of cheating with their lineup because, it's like just all kinds of stuff going on. Those were the days. So I flashed back to my Barry Sanders drafting as a rookie running back, and I got Jahmyr Gibbs with my second pick last night. I was pretty happy about that.
Yeah, and this is my favorite league because of, it's a combination of like a lot of old school players, yourself included, and some guys that you've been playing fantasy with for a long time, and then
I was going to say
my friends who are kind of like the newer fantasy players.
Right, my buddy Eric, who of course your godfather, he and I played in that same league together when I drafted Barry Sanders back in our Army days. He's the guy from my Army days that I still keep track with the most. We have been playing fantasy football for the better part of 30, whatever, how many years. We've taken a couple years off here and there, so it's probably a total of 30 of the last 35 years or something like that. And then my buddy Randy, who I was in college with, as well is part of the league, and he and I and Eric have been together for the better part of those 30 years. So we've
That's what makes the league.
Us old guys have been at it for a while.
Exactly.
Well, let's get to business. We've got some Notre Dame to talk today, and Marcus Freeman held his Thursday Zoom with the media earlier this afternoon, and we got an update on Devyn Ford, the kickoff returner, as well as Nolan Ziegler, the linebacker, whom we have not seen this year. Here are a couple of updates on those guys.
Devyn will be out, still in concussion protocol from last game. Nolan Ziegler is continuously dealing with a personal issue that has to it really relates to mental health. And so he's progressing, but he's just dealing with a personal issue. And
all right, so Devyn Ford, to begin with, the helmet-to-helmet hit that he took in last week's game against Tennessee State that was not flagged. He is out with concussion symptoms still. He will not play this weekend. Freeman said Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love will be the kickoff return men to take Devyn Ford's place there. So he really, just in terms of in the offense, has not been as big a factor as he has with special teams, Jess. So that's kind of where potentially he will be missed the most. But you've obviously got a couple pretty fast, explosive guys potentially out there taking his place with Price and Love.
Yeah, and that's, I think that speaks to the depth of, the Notre Dame running back room, and something that we've kind of talked about, throughout the season that's been noteworthy. And you're getting a lot of younger guys experience, and, Price and Love are guys that provide explosion and the ability to, get downfield quickly. So as much as it sucks to see Ford out and, because of a hit and because of, concussion protocol and everything like that, I'm confident that Notre Dame is very well equipped, to handle the situation essentially going forward. And again, it's just the only thing to me that it really hurts is the depth that we've talked about. Instead of having 5 guys in the running back room, you're going to have 4. Maybe they carry a 5th one just in case. I don't know. I don't think that they would. But yeah, it's not a huge blow overall. Ford's biggest impact is on special teams, I would say.
Yeah, and like Anthony says, he likes the kickoff replacements a lot. Again, you've got a couple of pretty good ones out there, and Jabron Payne has been back there on kickoffs as well. So be curious to see if Payne stays out there or if we get both Price and Love out there this weekend against NC State. And also, by the way, thank you very much for the super chat, Anthony. We do appreciate that. And then Nolan Ziegler, just unfortunately, the mental health issue. He missed all of fall training camp, had a really good spring, but missed all of training camp. And then, as Marcus Freeman says, still dealing with that, and don't expect him back anytime in the near future, unfortunately. So hopefully things go well for Nolan Ziegler. We'll obviously be thinking about him. Now, Jeremiah Love, Jaden Greathouse, a couple of the freshmen, the 2 probably most prominent freshmen on this team in terms of playing time so far this season. They will be experiencing, they and any other freshmen who are out there on the field at North Carolina State, experiencing their first true road game. So how do you get those guys prepped for that?
Try to explain what it's going to be like. You try to show them a video and just tell them, hey, this is kind of the environment you're going into. Nothing's going to be able to truly catch them up until they get the experience of going there and playing in a hostile environment. So Chuck, you try to just update. You try to just give them a visual of what it's going to be like. You try to do crowd noise in practice so they understand how to execute with nonverbal communication. But until you're actually in that element, you can't simulate it. And so we have to do a good job of being able to execute, to take out hopefully some of the distractions, the crowd noise, and the things that aren't within the white lines.
I realize this is a thing because it's your first road game and all that. And really the team is potentially going to need to use silent counts in some of those different kind of things. But like, how big a thing is this? I guess freshmen going into their first road game environment.
I would actually say that freshmen going into the Dublin road game would be more of a bigger environment than something like North Carolina State, just because it's a bigger stage. You're in a bigger country. You're in a different country. And the things that kind of correlate with that. So I really like the idea of, these freshmen have kind of already gone through a big moment or big adversity when being put on the stage of opening game of the season, playing in Dublin, playing in front of, so many fans in a professional venue. The only thing that deters me from the North Carolina State game is obviously your first Power 5 opponent of the season. It's on the road. And I think the thing that is the biggest factor for these freshmen is that it's a noon kickoff, right? And so younger kids, especially, and more so freshmen, they need to understand what the preparation is the night before, going through a routine, getting to bed early, getting quality rest, because it's going to be an early morning, Saturday morning, right? Like wake up calls is going to be around 6 or 7. There's going to be a team meal. They're going to head over to the stadium as a team. They're going to start warming up. Like the process of playing a new game is, everything gets set back much earlier. So I think that's the only thing I would initially be concerned with, is that their preparation and their rest, and then not being tired or lethargic the next morning in preparation for the game.
Yeah, that's a good point. You do have, Notre Dame obviously doesn't play noon home games, so that's going to be a lot different. Now, thankfully, it's not like Big 12 country where they're playing 11 a.m. home games because it's a noon Eastern time kickoff to get it on TV and all that kind of stuff. But like, to me, it's like, this is Finley Carter Stadium in Raleigh. Like Salty brings this up. The Great One played his high school games in stadiums bigger than NC State's. I don't doubt it. Well, maybe that might be fudging a little bit, but it's like a capacity of a little over 59,000, something like that. It's 20,000 smaller than Notre Dame Stadium. I think you hit it exactly right. Like going to Ireland, even though that was a mostly partisan Notre Dame crowd, it is still a different kind of environment, a big atmosphere going into that kind of atmosphere. It's not like you're going into Virginia Tech with all that comes with that, with Metallica and Enter Sandman and all that kind of stuff. That might actually, for a freshman who's never been on the road before, that might actually be an intimidating environment. Or even Florida State or Texas A&M next year, or any of these different kind of places. I don't think that North Carolina State and Finley Carter is going to be necessarily the most intimidating environment, especially for a noon game. Big difference between a noon game and a primetime kickoff, I think, when you're going on the road for the first time.
100% agree.
So something that might have bigger impact on the game this weekend is the weather. And there are scattered thunderstorms in the forecast for both Friday night and for throughout the day on Saturday in the Raleigh area. So here's Freeman on how you prepare for that weather.
I think, we've had a few wet ball practices, right, where we essentially went out in the rain during fall camp, and had to make sure we go out there and understand that no matter what the elements are, we have to go out there and perform. And, we have a plan. We've talked about it amongst ourselves as a staff that, hey, if it rains during a game, what's our plan? We had to do the same thing for Ireland. With the forecast called for rain in Ireland. And so we have a plan. We are always in communication in terms of, hey, what playing complementary football, what's necessary. And so to answer your question, we'll definitely have a plan, but also have communication in terms of what's best for both sides of the ball. Is it under center? Is it in the gun? How can we make sure that we have a chance to execute and not hurt ourselves because we don't have a plan for the elements that could be there on Saturday?
And DJ is actually right. It is 56,000, not 59,000, like I said. But still, it's even less than what I said before. But when we're talking about the capacity out there, so potential for some wet footballs out there. Did you ever practice with wet footballs and any of that kind of stuff?
We never practiced in wet footballs, but we did practice in the rain.
Okay.
And so, that's kind of the situation.
Well,
like, obviously,
if you practiced in the rain, you would have practiced with a wet football.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is we didn't deliberately
you didn't like saturate
wet.
the footballs and that kind of stuff.
And that's kind of what it sounded like with Marcus Freeman, is that on dry days they were maybe trying to get the ball a little bit slippery, because obviously you can't manufacture rain, right? Like it either rains that day and you practice outside in it, or you're doing something to compromise the football, aka getting it a little bit wet. So we definitely practice in the rain because of that there is potential that you're gonna play in the rain, and so there's no reason not to practice in the rain, no matter how enjoyable it was or how much it sucks. Sometimes you always kind of just practice in the elements. And I think the thing that sticks out to me the most is that Marcus Freeman just has a plan, right? Like it's not just hoping that it doesn't rain, or it's not just there is a concerted effort or a concentrated effort by the coaching staff to at least have some sort of practice with the wet football, because that's ultimately what it is. The rain the rain affects two things: your footing, and then the slippery, how slippery that the football is. And so I think if there is going to be rain, Notre Dame has to be surgical or precise about when they want to pass the ball, because the run favors Notre Dame. They have a very good running game, a physical downhill running game. So I would just see maybe an uptick in rushing, and then like I said, being more selective when you decide to pass the ball off the run game or the play action game.
That's exactly it. I think you're right. The rain has to favor Notre Dame because they have the better run game, and they also have the more accurate quarterback. Like we've talked about Brennan Armstrong, and we're going to talk about him more here in a minute, but you're talking about, okay, you've got a mobile quarterback, but he is also the less accurate quarterback. So I think the combination for Notre Dame of great running game, accurate quarterback with Sam Hartman you have to favor that much more over much less accurate quarterback, even if he is mobile, because he is the biggest threat of run that they have. Their leading rusher from a year ago only had a little over 500 yards. So I think it's a big check mark to Notre Dame if it does end up being a rainy day out there. Speaking of Brennan Armstrong and NC State, we'll save Brennan Armstrong here for a minute. I hope you've got your whiteboard ready to go, because we're going to be breaking it out here pretty soon. This next one is going to lead us into the whiteboard. Freeman talking about the NC State 3-3-5 defense today.
Yeah, they're an attacking, aggressive group, and they play extremely hard. And that's something that you don't always see every week, is a group that's so downhill, attacking and aggressive. They pressure from all different ways, and sometimes they might not even be pressuring, but their backs are playing so fast downhill that it might seem like a pressure. And so, and then all of a sudden they'll drop 8. So they do a good job of mixing it up. But we understand that this is going to be a very aggressive defense that's really good. They play fast, and what you realize is that they're clear on their assignments, because we always say, man, clarity equals velocity, and those guys play with a lot of velocity. But
by the way, Salty, nothing can touch your sweaty balls. They're so delicious. So, Jesse, there's Marcus Freeman on the 3-3-5. Thoughts on what he said, and then just get your stinking whiteboard ready to go, because we're going to break it out here.
Yeah, so, Marcus Freeman brings up kind of the biggest point when talking about the North Carolina State defense is it's athletic and it's fast, and that's what they want to do. It's high risk, high reward, but ultimately they just want to play fast, and they want to play fast downhill. And the reason why they're able to play fast is, you have 5 linebackers, and a lot of time these linebackers they're going to be athletically good. They're going to be quicker, and that allows them to do a lot of different things. So I do have some whiteboard prepared, but I also want to get into some defensive notes kind of about, the 3-3-5 and
okay,
kind of some pros and cons. I did this last week. I think it's a good a good thing to have an understanding of what the 3-3-5 is, and then, kind of using the whiteboard to articulate. So that is what I would like to do. So let me bring up my screen so you can have some sort of visual representation.
And by the way, that was Schweddy, spelled SCHWEDDY. Schweddy.
Are you done yet?
No.
All right. So we are talking about a 3-3-5 defense. Obviously, you have 3 down linemen. You have 5 linebackers, 3 in the middle, and 2 of these kind of overhang linebackers that you'll see on the edge. And then 3 defensive backs, usually 2 corners, and then a free safety over the top. So some 3-3-5 notes to get into. The defense is high risk, high reward, and that differs from the 4-2-5 that Notre Dame saw last week against Tennessee State. That is a more conservative, bend but don't break type of defense. The reason why this defense is so successful is that you can derive a lot of pressures off of it. And some defensive coordinators take a more athletic route, and they're known for, some coordinators would like to drop their linebackers to defensive line. And this allows the defensive line to stunt and be, quicker essentially. And then you also see kind of maybe bigger defensive backs drop down to the linebacker core to work in combination for stunts. So everywhere they want to get more athletic. And again, this allows for heavy pressure and disguise coverages. Really, that's the big part, is the disguise coverages while, bringing some sort of pressure at the same time. So some of the strengths of the...
Well, and this is something, not necessarily this team, because, again, they saw maybe something similar with Navy, but like you think back to some of these odd fronts that Notre Dame faced a few years back, really like Vanderbilt comes to mind, Ball State comes to mind. Again, that's been a few years, but the odd fronts with more linebackers standing up off the line, like you're talking about, that's given the offensive line and the protection fits at times, just because, like, you think, well, there's only 3 guys down, so Notre Dame's big, massive offensive line should be able to handle it. But what happens is they mix up pressures. They bring guys from different places and stuff like that. And they essentially try to confuse the offensive line in terms of where the pressures might come from.
Exactly. And that's what makes this defense so hard to defend attack sometimes, is exactly what you were talking about. It's an odd front, and they'll mix and match pressures with their linebackers. They'll create 4-man, 5-man pressures with different stunts amongst their defensive line and their linebackers. So, some of the bigger strengths for this 3-3-5 defense is it has a ton of flexibility and versatility within the scheme. You can move a lot of guys around, and that's a big one of the big overall strengths. And really, too, it's easy to not tip coverage. They can disguise coverage, and they can run cover 1 and cover 3 in the same pre-snap shell, right? So they can come out in this same look that I'm showing here, and they could be playing cover 1 or cover 3, and you have no idea. And what cover 1 is basically, you have man and you have a free safety over top. And then in cover 3, these corners are going to bail out and the safety is going to be over top. So they can show the same pre-snap look, and you don't know if they're going to run cover 1 or cover 3. And another thing that is really beneficial for them is, even we've talked about this before, a great thing is pre-snap motion. And that's a lot of what Notre Dame does to understand coverage. Well, that's not going to help them against this defense, because these 5 linebackers, they just shift. They pass along the motion man. So even with motion, you're not going to know what coverage they're playing. There's nothing that's going to tip their pre-snap coverage. So that's a big strength of their defense. And it really allows for their linebackers or their overhang players, these 5 guys, to work into the blitzing that we talked about, different stunts with the defensive linemen. And I'd say the last big strength is its ability to adjust to different formations. Even if teams want to bring in a linebacker or an H-back, whatever you want to call it, all that linebacker has to do is come down and stack with a tight end or an H-back, right? And so, again, everyone's just going to bump out a little bit, bump over a little bit, bump over a little bit. and you still have the same 5 linebackers, but again, it's just they're kind of shifting left and right depending on what the formation calls for.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, you've got more, so continue, and then I'll save my questions as we go.
Yeah, so we just kind of talked about the strengths of the 3-3-5 defense. I'd like to get into some of the weaknesses of the 3-3-5 defense and where Notre Dame should exploit this.
That's basically where I was going to go. How Notre Dame can exploit it. What some things that they can do to try to take advantage of it, especially with the guy like Hartman and all the different personnel they have. Yeah.
So next thing that we have is, how you want to attack this. What is the weakness of this defense? The big 2 areas of the field that are going to be highly, attackable by the offense is your edges in terms of the run game. You want to attack the perimeter on the edges and really get outside, right? And then the other area that you want to attack in the passing game are both of these seams. You want to get up these seams very quickly. So if these are the areas of the field that you want to look to exploit, you want to exploit the run on the edge because you only have 3 defensive linemen. And then in terms of the passing game, you want to attack these seams. You want to get up these seams as quickly as possible. So those are some of the weaknesses or I would say like the areas of the field that are the biggest weakness of a 3-3-5. So now I'm going to get into some kind of, simple concepts or formations that I would expect Notre Dame to run in order to attack this defense.
Okay.
So the first thing that I would get into if I were Notre Dame is, again, we talked about pre-snap and the 3-3-5. They can disguise cover 1 or cover 3. In this look right here where you have, middle of the field, 2 wide receivers split out on either side and the quarterback in shotgun and the running back, back there in shotgun with him. I don't see Notre Dame run a ton of this. So I don't think Notre Dame is actually going to run this kind of, 2-by-2 look. I think they'll run a variation of it because of, what they like to do with their tight ends. So I think that they'd still get into a 2-by-2 look. It's just one side will have, 2 wide receivers and the other side would have a wide receiver and a tight end. So you're looking here at a lot of 11 personnel, right?
Okay.
So what do you do in 11 personnel knowing that the seams are vulnerable and a team likes to run a lot of cover 1 and cover 3? I'm gonna say it now for the fans that are looking for the deep ball. This is the game for you because immediately 4 verts. 2 guys, 1 guy up the seam, whether that's the tight end releasing up the seam, you have 4 verts, 2 guys, 2 of those verts are on the seam, and then 2 of those guys are on the outside. That's an immediate, probably the most simple, easiest way to beat this defense because again, in cover 3, you have 3 guys deep and you got 4 guys running 4 verts. If you want to run cover 1, then you got 1 guy over the top and you got a lot of corners trying to play man on some faster and bigger wide receivers. So that is the kind of first concept that I would look at is getting vertical on these guys and getting vertical up the seam.
And you've got linebackers trying to cover receivers in some cases as well, which is big matchup.
And that's the thing is you have these kind of linebacker / rover position guys who are trying to guard faster, wide receivers essentially. So that's the first thing that I would look at is running some sort of 4 verts. And again, the big thing is getting up the seams now, getting up the seams very, very quickly because, seam routes, the corners are going to try to squeeze the seam with the safety help. It's just a matter of, are they going to get there quick enough? Like you were talking about. And so a good quarterback can hit that route from, on either side of the field. Sam Hartman's got to see these number 1 wide receivers on each side of the field and be able to drop it to them rather quickly. So that's in terms of, first and foremost in the pass game, it's getting vertical quickly. Let me go to.
Here's a question from DJ. Wouldn't RPO and tunnel screens be successful is what DJ asks.
I would lean towards no, because that plays into their athleticism and their downhill and their speed and their ability to rally on the ball as linebackers. You really want to try to stretch this defense out because, again, they're running a lot of cover 1 and cover 3. And if you can get vertical with 4 guys, you're just basically outnumbering them or asking, some of these corners and linebackers to basically play one-on-one coverage down the field.
Gotcha.
I just think the underneath stuff bails them out, and it plays into their advantage of wanting to play, downhill fast and being athletic downhill.
And then you're basically just kind of asking Sam Hartman in a couple of seconds to figure out who's the open man deep and go for it.
Yeah, when he's got to run, when he's got to diagnose, the potential of having 2 coverages off the bat, right? Because it's either cover 1 or cover 3. So I like the idea of sneaking Chris Tyree or some of these bigger tight ends down the seam.
Yeah, that's what I think we're all kind of, it's a good day because I'm not BK says looking for Tyree for a big game versus the linebackers going up the seam. I like that. I think it's another advantage Notre Dame in that instance. What else you got?
So next screen is, again, another formation that I would expect Notre Dame to get into. And this is, it plays into a lot of what we saw last week. I think if you're, depending on what hash that you're in, you want to put trips into the field side, right? So what that means is you if the ball's on the right hash, you put 3 wide receivers to the field side in some sort of trips formation. And again, I don't care how you comprise the trips, whether that's a tight end and 2 wide receivers, whether that's 3 wide receivers. I don't necessarily care. But the reason why the trip into the field side is so successful is because it forces the Sam linebacker to have to bump out, right? This guy right here now has to bump out. And so if my stuff would coordinate, what that means is now this Sam linebacker has to split the gap between the last guy on the line of scrimmage and the number 3 wide receiver to his side. And that now leaves only 5 guys in the box with 5 offensive linemen, right? And so these trips will displace the Sam linebacker and allow for an even matchup in the box. 5 linemen and 3 down linemen and 2 linebackers. So you got a 5-on-5 matchup. So immediately what I look for in this instance is you ask your tackle to reach the defensive end or the end guy on the line of scrimmage. You ask your center to reach the nose tackle. And now this is similar to that Jeremiah Love touchdown that we saw last week. When you can pull 2 guards out in front, I mean, you basically have, again, 5 linemen, and then you got these 2 pulling guards. It's a 2-on-2 matchup, right? And so all the running back has to do is get behind these 2 pulling guards, and you got the numbers. There's a hat for everyone accounted for. So this trips to the field side is going to displace the Sam linebacker, get you even numbers in the box in terms of 5-on-5, and then you start pulling these guards out, and you just have a good numbers matchup. So that's the thing I would look for. And also, and if you're not going to run out of this look, what this does too is if you have trips to the field side, I guarantee this safety is going to have to play some sort of help defense over here. So what does that do? That frees
up more space. Yeah.
That leaves your boundary wide receiver one-on-one with a corner. I'll take that matchup any time of the week. Again, because of you displace the Sam linebacker and you get even numbers in the box with the 5-on-5 matchup.
Very good. And what I like about what we've seen of Jared Parker's offense so far is he has done a lot of this using his personnel and formation to set some of these things up like you're talking about. Case in point, the Jeremiah Love touchdown where he did the same thing, where he shifted guys in one direction, used those big offensive linemen to throw some blocks, and then he's got Tobias Merriweather as a blocker as well. Tobias has been a really good blocking receiver so far, and so again, I just like the way they have used their personnel to kind of maybe show one thing and make you have to defend one thing, and then you just do something else the other way.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a lot of what we're going to see is manipulation of the linebacker, displacing these Sam linebackers and making them, spread out and have to, it basically frees up the box in some case. And, Michael Hahn brings up a good point. The boundary corner is North Carolina's best player, but that's by design. If they're going to run this 3-3-5 defense and knowing that the Sam is displaced and the safety has to help over the top, you're going to put your best coverage corner into the boundary, but you still want to look to exploit that one-on-one matchup at some point.
Right. And if he can be their best cornerback, coverage cornerback. But if you're running at him, there's only so much that he can do in that case.
Yeah. And so again, I would expect a lot of, if Notre Dame is on the hash, I would expect a lot of, trips to the field side to spread this thing out. And then you have options you can run, when you have options of having a hat for a hat, 5-on-5, you can get into a lot of different things in the pass game and the run game. And again, I talked about how do you beat them in the run game. You have to get to the edge. I don't see Notre Dame running a lot of inside run. I think they're going to get out to the edge with a lot of pulling guards. And they're going to try to, and even though I say that you got to get up the seam, that doesn't, just because you're trying to get up the seam doesn't mean it has to be 20 yards down the field. Hartman, if they're going to blitz, Hartman can hit Chris Tyree going up the seam 5 or 10 yards down the field. The depth doesn't really matter. It's the part of the field that you want to attack.
Right. Couple of different questions here. Jay Clampett Investments. Am I wrong thinking Hartman uncorks the deep ball this week? That's what Jesse was just talking about. You think we're going to see?
He is going to, for the fans that have been wanting to see that downfield ball or letting Sam Hartman let it loose. This is going to be the week.
And then Michael wants to know, how good are the NC State linebackers?
In order to play a defense like this, you have to be fast and athletic. You got to be able to, hold your own in the run game, but also be able to help out coverage wise. I think this defense demands the most out of coverage, out of their linebackers, because of what I was talking about, how these offenses are going to displace these overhang or kind of Sam linebackers in the pass game. And I'll give North Carolina State credit to their linebackers. Their linebacker was the ACC player of the week last week, or defensive player of the week last week, I'm pretty sure. So these linebackers know how to play, and they know how to play fast.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting matchup up front. G-Baby saying Jeremiah Love's going to have a great game this weekend. Going to be really curious to see what that, what the mixing and matching of the running backs looks like, because this is definitely this will be the best defense they've played so far, and it is more unique than what they've seen so far, and they have mixed and matched and done a lot of different things with these backs. They really tried to get Estime outside last week against Tennessee State early on. That really didn't work, and finally they just had to let him hammer it up the middle and let him break his own tackles and get downfield. So again, curious to see if they kind of stick with that approach with Estime, or does it become more of a Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love type game, with the speed and quickness to get those edges like you're talking about.
Yeah, and Jeff Brown brings up a good question here of two back looks that for Clemson that really opened up their game in the second half against Duke. This is something I'll always advocate for, especially with Notre Dame's depth at running back, and what you can do getting one-on-one matchups with the inside linebackers in this defense is, I'd love to see two back sets, because it gives you an advantage of one, getting to the edge quicker, and having options to get to the edge in terms of the run game. And again, if a team wants to run a 3-3-5 and you start, you get in trips and you displace some of these running backs, you could line up with two running backs and motion, a running back to make a trips formation to the field side, right? And it displaces those guys, and it forces inside linebackers to have to play man coverage on a running back, and that's something that you always want, ideally in a matchup.
Absolutely. All right. Anything else for Notre Dame's offense against the NC State defense, or you want to flip it to the other side?
I think I'm ready to flip it to the other side.
All right. Well, let's go to Marcus Freeman then, because we know what the focus for North Carolina State is on the offensive side of the football. It is the quarterback, Brennan Armstrong, and here's Marcus Freeman on defending him.
I just think it's the mindset of your guys that are rushing, right? And we can't have guys behind the quarterback. We can't give him vertical lanes to step up and escape from. But it's a double-edged sword, because I don't want four guys spying a quarterback, right? And having a QB spy is something you'll have every game, but it's a mindset of understanding we have to be controlling our rush. We can't be out of control and end up behind the quarterback and give him those lanes to escape from. But we're going to have to keep him in the pocket, right? And it's something we didn't do a great job with at Tennessee State. I mean, he got out of the pocket a couple of times, though both quarterbacks. And so we got to do a better job there. But it's just a mentality and a mindset. Like, we have to be aggressive, but we can't be out of control where we end up behind the quarterback.
Last year we spoke with Coach Cole.
So this quarterback, Brennan Armstrong, is going to be much better than what Notre Dame saw last week against Tennessee State. Marcus Freeman said they needed to do a better job, that they let him get outside a little bit. So do you have your board ready to go in terms of what needs to happen to accomplish some of the things that Marcus Freeman was talking about there?
Yeah, so getting in a little bit of, stopping. Sorry, let me backtrack there a little bit. Let me first talk about, the biggest thing that Marcus Freeman said and how it's playing into, kind of what I'm about to get into myself is he talks about the mindset of his defensive line. And specifically, I think it's more geared towards his defensive ends, right? Because the defensive ends have the biggest task this week. They have to distinguish between zone read and designed quarterback run. That's a big difference for the defensive end, and it completely changes your assignment. And that's probably the biggest thing that how Washington has been working on with these defensive ends all week is distinguishing between zone read and designed quarterback runs. And they have to have the mentality of, and like he said, you can't get upfield because if you bull rush and get upfield, that's going to create very nice running lanes for Brennan Armstrong, and that's the last thing that Notre Dame wants. Because I personally see Brennan Armstrong more of a threat as a runner than I do a passer, to be quite honest with you.
Me too.
His passing game complements his running game. It's not the other way around. So, getting back into a little bit of what I was talking about, you cannot blitz because that is going to create lanes and alleys. And so, as boring as that sounds, Notre Dame cannot, and we've seen the tendency with Al Golden before, he cannot get into blitzing because that is going to create, a blown blitz, a blown assignment that's going to create an easy lane for Brennan Armstrong to run down. So what would you expect? You should expect a 4-down front. That plays into, Notre Dame's kind of standard typical defense. You can expect a lot of zone reads. You can expect a lot of RPOs. You can expect a lot of play action boot. And you can expect, pure straight quarterback design runs. Those are the things that you can expect out of this offense. So how do you beat it? What's the beater for this type of offense? Well, you have to have some sort of manipulation with the run fits. So that'll bring me over to my whiteboard. What exactly does that mean? That means that these 4 guys need to get busy. I can't even. I don't think this is going to edit quite. It doesn't really make an ellipse. It makes more. Oh, there we go. You have to be concerned about these 4 guys have to play the best game that they've ever played, right? They can't create alleys, and they have to be able to stunt how they bring pressure on this North Carolina State front. They just can't keep coming up the field all game. In order to really manipulate the run game, there needs to be a variation of stunts among this defensive line. So maybe it's, defensive end is folding in and defensive tackle is folding out. Maybe, on both sides. And maybe, sometimes they find a way to bring in one of these linebackers to get a 5-man stunt. But it has to be the defensive line has to manipulate the run game by doing some sort of running stunts. The next thing is this is something that I advocate for a lot, and I think it can be very successful. I don't know if Notre Dame is going to do this. I hope that they do this. It's what I've known to be some sort of Viking stunt. And what this is you are going to, instead of bringing your defensive end, he's going to drop into coverage, and now you replace him with a linebacker. So what that does is it allows – first, it's going to throw off the read of the quarterback. Mm-hmm. And then second, you're getting a more athletic, more faster guy that is going to have a better chance of tackling someone like Brennan Armstrong. And I not only like that coming out of linebackers, but again, something that we saw a lot of success with last year in the Notre Dame defense is why not bring this corner off the edge right now and then bring off, allow this defensive end to work into the flat coverage there and then allow your safety to kind of replace that corner. But I love the idea of bringing these backside corners immediately on Brennan Armstrong so he's forced to make a decision of, I need to either tuck this ball and run now or I'm going to sit here and get smoked by a cornerback essentially. So that is something that I like too, is playing games with these defensive linemen, dropping them into coverage and replacing them with a 4-man stunt with either your linebacker or your defensive back.
Right. So you're saying, like you started off by saying you cannot blitz. What you really mean is you cannot blitz your linebackers necessarily.
You shouldn't
but there are other ways to get pressure. Right. But there are other ways to get pressure on him.
Yeah. You just need to create 4-man pressures with different stunts. And you can blitz a corner, but you need to replace that corner. You can blitz a linebacker, but you need to replace that linebacker essentially. So Notre Dame, I don't see them bringing more than 6 guys this week. I think bringing 5 is enough, or is more than enough too. I see the majority of the time you'll see them working 4-man fronts, different stunts among the defensive line. And then again, maybe dropping that defensive end into coverage. And that's an advantage for Notre Dame because of the athleticism of Botello, Jean-Baptiste. Those are guys who can easily fold into coverage here and there, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
So to kind of take it a step further, I really want to emphasize. Sorry. Let me. Before I get into that, I think if you get into 2nd and 3rd and long, you're going to see a dedicated QB spy, and that's going to be the Maris Leafau or the Jalen Sneeds of the game. Where if it's 2nd and 3rd and long, yeah, it's a passing down, but it's not really a passing down for NC State in all regards because Brennan Armstrong would love to run the ball. So how do you beat that? You get a nice 4-man stunt, and then you have a quarterback spy with Maris or Jalen Sneed who has eyes on the quarterback at all times.
Eyes, good athleticism, the whole thing. Yep.
Right. And then this will bring me into my last point. And again, I want to emphasize how important these up front 4 guys are for Notre Dame. They are going to dictate this game and really ultimately determine the success of, whether or not Brennan Armstrong has a great game. And this is going to go back to exactly what Marcus Freeman was just talking about in his press conference. There has to be what I'll call lane integrity. And when I was playing football, we called this the cage concept. I'm not sure if you've heard of this before, but you have a high cage and you have a low cage. Your high cage are your ends, your defensive ends. Those are your high cage players. And then your low cage players are your 1 technique and your 3 technique. And so your high cage players, those guys attack or suffocate the upfield shoulder of the quarterback. So if the quarterback is coming out this way, you want to keep your upfield shoulder and keep him inside of that pocket. But again, you're not going to go too far up the field. I think the word that I would like to use is condense or suffocate. You want to come upfield and keep that upfield shoulder, but also squeeze the pocket and force Brennan Armstrong to have to step up into the pocket, essentially, because you want him to step into your defensive lineman. And if he decides he wants to run it up the middle, well, you got linebackers coming to fold in as well. So these high cage players have to keep the quarterback upfield shoulder, and they can't get too far downfield. They have to squeeze or condense the quarterback. Right. And then when we're talking about the low cage players, these are your 1 and 3 technique, your tackle and nose guard. These guys also need to basically squeeze or condense the pocket and not allow Brennan Armstrong the ability to kind of run right up the middle. So in terms of, how this defense performs this weekend, it's going to be up to the front 4. And I like that challenge for Notre Dame because they have so much depth at the front 4 and athleticism. Sure. They can rotate a lot of bodies, and they have the athleticism to keep that upfield shoulder on the quarterback and squeezing him or condensing him back into the pocket.
Yeah, and it could be a situation somewhat similar to when you face Navy, because assignments are going to be important just in terms of who's the best contained guy. Those different kind of things. You could see specific guys out there for those kind of specific purposes, I guess.
Exactly.
All right. Great stuff. We will see how it all turns out. Is that all you've got for us on the old whiteboard tonight, Jess?
Yeah, session is over. I think I got a good 25, 30 minutes in there. So I need to take a sip of water here.
Excellent.
I'm getting a little dry.
Hydrate. And in the meantime, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's get right into it, baby.
Let's do it. Okay, so Notre Dame favored by 7.5 as of this afternoon. Do you like them to cover?
I love them to cover. I'll keep it short and simple. UConn and NC State were tied, 7-7, and then it got 10-7 right before halftime off a last-second field goal. I think it's criminal that Notre Dame is only a 7-point favor in this game, 7.5, depending on what book you're on. Me personally, I put $150 on them to cover the spread, so that should tell you how confident I am in that spread.
All right. Stymie says he is confident, but he is not betting on it. Jesse is confident, and he did bet on it. I'm 7.5. I think so as well. We're not going to give away our predictions on this show. We will save that for countdown to kickoff, but I am very, very confident. I do have Notre Dame winning by a good shade more than just 8 points. So I'm very confident in that. I think it's going to work out. And again, if you go back to the weather, if indeed it does end up being a rainy day, I think that favors Notre Dame much more than it favors North Carolina State in this game. So good weather, bad weather, whatever. I think it favors Notre Dame. We've got some score predictions that have been coming in here. What about the over-under, 50.5 points? What do you like there?
I'm actually not a fan of touching the over-under in this game because of the inclement, chance of weather. Notre Dame could keep the ball on the ground. And then also, to me, Notre Dame's defense hasn't showed me that they're going to give up a lot of points. I know that they haven't played, great offenses or anything like that, but I mean, they're still playing assignment sound. They're still playing fast. And as long as they contain Brennan Armstrong, I just don't see North Carolina scoring a lot of points. And so even if Notre Dame racks up, 38 points themselves and it's 38-10, that's 48 points and we still don't hit that 50.5 point over under. So I'm kind of leaning towards the under right now, to be honest with you, just because of, Notre Dame's defensive presence and the chance of inclement rain, throughout the day. Yeah.
Droop75 says people are underestimating how good NC State is at home. I want, what is it, like 18 of their last 20 they've won at home, but they play the ACC. Notre Dame has won 28 straight games against the ACC, and I just don't buy that, especially for a noon kickoff, as some great hostile environment. Notre Dame has only played there once, and that was in the Hurricane 7 years ago. So I agree with what you're saying. If the weather is bad, and I should have thought of that before I placed my wager, but if the weather is bad, you're right. I definitely under 50.5. But otherwise, if it's just, some light sprinkles and stuff like they did see in Ireland, I like this game to go well over 50.5 points.
That's the same thing I felt. But again, I just don't feel comfortable with how good Notre Dame's defense has been, that North Carolina State's going to contribute. And then if you throw in the fact that it might rain, that's going to slow down Notre Dame's offensive production a little bit as well.
Andre saying 56-10. Corey saying 42-17. Old Grim saying 38.
It's a lot of overs.
17. Yeah, that's again. If the weather is good and the weather is cooperating, I think that a couple of those scores, especially like Corey's and Old Grim's, are kind of the ballpark that I'm looking at. But if it gets sloppy out there, then that can change things quite a bit. That's literally a game changer. But I think the weather is going to dictate that. I like the over if the weather is good. So now I just have to hope the weather is good because I've already put my money someplace. Okay, so we were talking about running backs a little bit ago. Just touched on the running backs a little bit. Here's Marcus Freeman on the running back group that he's got.
As far as the running backs room, again, it's a talented room that has a lot of guys that can help us. And I love what Coach Dealin is doing in terms of having certain packages for certain guys and being able to really use all the positive attributes that they have. And so, again, it takes a great coach, but a great room to continue to be unselfish because there's one ball, but everybody's embracing the role and really helping our offense perform at a high level.
So there you go, Jess. My question to you is, do you think the share of carries, the way the carries have been split so far for the running backs, will it change as Notre Dame faces better competition than they've seen so far?
No, I don't believe so. And I think that the reason why I think these early games were a nice way to break these running backs in, I guess you could say a little bit. But Marcus Freeman hit on the head. These running backs have different positive attributes or different skills that they might be a little bit better at compared to the guy next to him in the running back room. And we just kind of talked about it a little bit and what we can expect, out of the Notre Dame offense. If Notre Dame wants to attack the edge, like we said that they were going to, I think you do that with Jeremiah Love. I think you do that with some of your your guys that are a little bit shiftier and a little bit quicker. And then you use someone like Audric Estime to really pound the ball up the middle and between the tackles when it calls for it, right? And so I just think that different situations did call for a different kind of, I wouldn't say running back, but when you have the depth that Notre Dame does and that you have guys who can do different things, you have certain plays that work better for different running backs. And if you're trying to attack a certain part of the field or stretch out a little bit more instead of getting downhill, I think it calls for a different kind of running back. So I don't really see, and especially with Devyn Ford out, I don't see that these running backs that their carries are split up really any other way.
I really don't either. I think it's all situational. And you go back to this to the list of jobs that Deland McCullough has for these running backs. I think it's more about that than it is necessarily level of competition. Now, the jobs can change as maybe the speed of the competition, the proficiency of the defense and things like that ratchet up. But so far, Audric Estime has 29 carries for over 200 yards through 2 games. And then you go, Jeremiah Love has 9 carries. Jabron Payne has 12 carries. Jadarian Price has 6. And we were talking about Devyn Ford hasn't necessarily been as big a factor in the offense. He has 2. I still think, I like what Jabron Payne has done. I again, in spots, I think Jeremiah Love and especially Jadarian Price as well, like their speed changes things, but I think it's about what they're trying to accomplish on the given play. And you heard Marcus Freeman talk about it, how the way he is able to sort of mix up different packages for what the play calls for and get that guy on the field. So I don't think it's necessarily going to be dictated by who they're playing. I think it's all just going to be dictated on, what the play calls for in terms of who gets out there on the field. And a lot of it is still going to be, the answer is still going to be Audric Estime because of who he is and his unique skill set. So Michael, like coming in hard. He says, stop the NC State defense is really similar to playing Navy, and they are not a highly talented offense.
Wow. So I get what he's saying here.
Well, I mean, for one, I didn't say they are really similar to Navy. The scheme is similar to Navy. To me, that's where the similarities begin and end. Like so, like if you're going to nitpick, I didn't say that they were really similar. There's similarities in the scheme.
Yeah, there's similarities in the scheme. But I think North Carolina State is a very good defense. Last year, they were the number 1 scoring defense in the country. They know how to get sacks. They know how to take the ball away. They're a really good unit. I think the only thing that holds them back this year is they only have 4 returning guys from that defense last year. So even though the formation is the same, they had a really good defense last year. It's going to give Notre Dame fits. It's given Sam Hartman's fits in the past. But Sam Hartman hasn't had the offensive line talent that he has in the past to be able to pick up these stunts from NC State. And I don't think he's had quite the talent in the running back room to relieve the pass game like he has in the past, right? And so even when things were going bad in the past at Wake Forest, he was just told to keep airing the ball out. That's no longer the case. He has a run game that can relieve the pass game if things aren't going well. So do I think that, Notre Dame's going to have a bit of a struggle with North Carolina State defense? Yeah, it's a good defense, and it's fundamentally, the 3-3-5, it works for what they're trying to do. I just think that Sam Hartman with this new line and I would say, toys to play with that running back and wide receiver, it's going to be a much different outcome than what we've seen in the past.
Yep. Going back to the spreads, Bill says Notre Dame's the number 5 team against the spread in college football over the last 5 years. They're often underestimated. Now, I haven't looked back historically over the last 5 years, but remember they were horrible against the spread last year, especially as a double-digit favorite. Now, they are not double-digit favorites in this game, obviously, because as we just talked about, 7.5 was the latest line that I saw. And maybe that's a good thing, because when the spreads were closer, that's when Notre Dame fared much better. It was when they were double-digit favorites last year that they really laid the eggs. So take that for what you will.
Yep.
So USC quarterback Caleb Williams is apparently willing to stay in school if he doesn't want to play for the team that ends up with the first pick in the NFL draft next year. Caleb's dad, Carl Williams, says his son could stay at USC for an extra year if he doesn't like the environment of the team that has the number 1 pick. Here's the quote from GQ magazine. "The funky thing about the NFL process is he'd almost be better off not being drafted than being drafted first. The system is completely backwards. The way the system is constructed, you go to the worst possible situation, the worst possible team, the worst organization in the league, because of their desire for parity, gets the first pick. So it's the gift and the curse. So if there's not a good situation, the truth is he can come back to school." End quote. Carl Williams, Caleb's dad. So what do you think of this, Jesse? Caleb Williams might not declare for the draft, depending on who ends up with the number 1 pick.
So first of all, I'm just going to say with a blanket statement, this comment is completely stupid, first and foremost. I'm going to dissect it piece by piece now.
Big breakdown.
And the quote, he says, "The system is completely backwards." That is completely false. The worst team deserves the best player because obviously they need it, right? So that is not the system being backwards. That's just Caleb Williams, that's just him not wanting his son to be put into a bad situation because he's going to be the first overall pick. That leads me to my second point. It doesn't matter if you are, Caleb Williams this season or Caleb Williams next season, you're going to be the top tier quarterback. You're going to be the number 1 pick overall. And so it's going to be a bad team probably drafting you no matter what, right? Unless it's like
that's why they have the number 1 pick.
Right. Unless it's that situation where, the Cowboys drafted Ezekiel Elliott because their starting quarterback was hurt the whole season, but they had a ton of talent. That doesn't happen very often. You're going to get drafted by a team that desperately needs you because you're desperately bad. That's not dependent on the year. That's the facts every single year. And so to me, it just sounds like, Caleb Williams wants his he just wants it all. He wants to be the best player and he wants to go to the best team and have an immediate impact. Well, it's just not going to happen like that. No matter what, you're going to be drafted by a bad team because that's the reason why they're drafting first overall.
And I mean, this is really no different potentially than like John Elway being drafted by the Colts and saying, "I'm not going to the Colts." And he ends up getting traded to Denver. And he was saying before the draft, "Don't draft me because I'm not going to sign with you." And it's no different than Eli Manning getting his dad, Archie, to get him out of San Diego and get him traded for Phillip Rivers to go to the Giants. It's same deal. They didn't want to go to the Chargers. They got the deal worked and he went to the Giants instead. So what Caleb Williams has is a year of eligibility that he hopes to leverage. Like, I wonder if this is actually directed at the Arizona Cardinals, because there's already been this talk about the Cardinals.
100% is.
Well, yeah. And they're, like the Cardinals tanking for picks, and look at what they've done. They drafted Josh Rosen a few years ago. They hired, a new head coach the next year, and they let him draft his quarterback. So they went with quarterbacks at the top of the draft a couple of years in a row. And now there's all this talk about, are they tanking to get Caleb Williams? So how much is specific to Arizona, I think, in this whole deal? Because just as you said, no matter what, the worst team is going to get the number 1 pick because they're the worst team. So it's not going to be an optimal situation no matter what. But, just look at what some of these young quarterbacks have done for the teams that they've been drafted by. Like Cincinnati picked very high. Look at what they've done with Joe Burrow already. and look at the Chargers as an example with Herbert in the same draft. So yeah, I would be really curious to see if he actually does indeed stay in school for another year, because you can say, well, he risks injury and all that kind of stuff, which he does, but there's also a heck of a lot of NIL money floating around out there right now that makes things a little bit easier for someone potentially like him who would want to stay in school for another year and still at least make some money before being drafted. So I'd be really curious to see if he actually follows through on this.
Yep. And it just, to me, it sounds like, we know Caleb Williams has been a dedicated to his craft ever since he was a kid, right? Like, I remember them talking about it last year that he had a dietitian and all this stuff. And it was, Caleb Williams wanted these things because he wanted to be good. I just think that Caleb Williams and his father fear for a guy that's been great his whole life, that they don't want all of that hard work and everything to go to waste because of a potential spot that doesn't fit, for Caleb Williams at the end of the day. So, it just simply comes down to they don't want to go from the best to the worst at the end of the day. But, that's the consequences of being the best player. If you're the best player, you are expected to be able to pull a team out of poverty, essentially.
Yeah. Salty said Williams' dad is waiting on the flip draft when the Super Bowl winner picks first. Not likely. Yeah. And it's like, you also wouldn't take a quarterback because you just won the Super Bowl.
Probably got a franchise quarterback if you're winning the Super Bowl.
That's right. Brett says $3 million a year NIL for Caleb in the article he read, and I've seen around that amount as well. And I mean, if he ends up winning a second Heisman, could you imagine the money that he can cash in on by staying for another year as well?
No, I could not, because it would be a lot of money.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Tony Dorsett, went to our team as the top player. They were already pretty good before Tony, but Tony put him over the top, helped him win Super Bowl 12. Cal Chancellor Carol Chris says the ACC is interested in using Dallas as a place where teams in the new conference could potentially come together to play to minimize the impact of travel for the Eastern and Western schools. What do you think of this possibility? Like, instead of traveling all the way across country, you meet in Dallas, where SMU is located, and maybe you play some neutral site games. What do you think of that?
I think it doesn't matter unless for football, it doesn't matter.
It's not going to happen for football.
Yeah,
we're talking about Olympic sports, basically.
I think it's honestly a great idea because of the market that you're in. And then the fact that the only thing that would suck is you would play on a neutral site, but in some of these sports, how much does a home field advantage really, matter at the end of the day? And if you are concerned about travel and cutting down, the taking away study time, homework time from a lot of these players, then I think a neutral ground is a good way to start the conversation and a really good idea to get the brainstorming kind of going amongst these people, because it's a problem, obviously, and you can't just you keep saying it's a problem without proposing anything to fix it. So I like that there is already an initiative and brainstorming going on, and I think it's something that ultimately would work at the end of the day, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I do too. And like, you could potentially send like Cal basketball or women's maybe not the basketballs, just because there's more revenue possibilities, at least with basketball home games, than some of the other sports, but like softball and swimming and some of these different kind of sports that aren't necessarily the revenue generators, where you can send them to Dallas, where the weather is good most of the time, and you could potentially have like a couple of games in the same weekend against different teams by playing in Dallas, and you could kill double up and kill a couple birds with one stone. So I think that it is I think it's an interesting proposal, and it sounds like they're probably going to do this, at least for some sports. And travel is the biggest thing. Again, going back to what you were just talking about with the academics and missed class time and all that kind of stuff, and I think that this could really help some of that, because that's like the biggest thing that everyone wants to talk about, is the fact that, okay, you're in California and you're in South Florida, or you're on the East Coast in these different kind of places. So again, It's not going to be for football. I doubt that it would be for the basketballs because, again, at least more revenue opportunities. But for other sports, I think it's an interesting way to potentially do some of this. So of the teams that lost last weekend, LSU, these three teams, LSU, Clemson, TCU, who do you give the best chance to be a playoff contender?
Yeah, out of those teams that lost last week, LSU, Clemson, TCU, I think the easy answer, and I don't think it's really a dispute, is LSU. TCU has a really bad defense, and I don't their offense. I don't know what to take from because they played Colorado, so that's also probably not a great defense in terms of a national comparison. LSU doesn't have a quarterback that's dynamic. They don't have a quarterback that is a game changer like Watson or Lawrence that they've been spoiled by in the past. I just don't think Cade Klubnik is going to get the job done. And so then you look at LSU, you look at the talent of 4- and 5-star recruits that they bring in. I'm still very high on Daniels at quarterback, and ultimately that's what has me over, LSU over Clemson, is that Daniels is a far better quarterback than Klubnik, and he showed far more flashes of greatness compared to Klubnik. And so, it's a tough matchup the first game of the season to have to play another ranked opponent on the road. But I think LSU will get it together, and ultimately they have the best chance out of those three.
I tend to agree because, for what you outlined just with the personnel and what those teams have on the roster, I'm crossing TCU off. I just don't see it because even last year they won a handful of one-score games and, like 10-point games and those kind of things. Their defense is obviously worse. Their offense is okay. They play BYU, they play Kansas State, they play Texas, Oklahoma, and Houston. I just don't see them coming out of this thing and being a playoff team again. I think that was like a once in a lifetime kind of deal for TCU. Clemson, I don't see any way they're beating both Florida State and Notre Dame this season. And that's what they would have to do. Like, I give them a chance to contend in the ACC still, but in terms of playoff team, no, I just don't see it. LSU, I just give the best chance, even though they've got to play Alabama. Again, you got to remember, it's a non-conference loss that they've got. They've got to go to Ole Miss. They've got to go to Alabama. They've got Arkansas and Texas A&M. So they don't have an easy slate by any means. But just with what they've got, they could potentially lose one game and still get into the SEC championship game. And then you never know after that. So I've got to give LSU the best shot just because the other two, I just don't see it by any stretch. All right, one more question tonight. NFL season starts tonight with the Lions visiting the reigning Super Bowl champion, Kansas City Chiefs. How many more Super Bowls do the Chiefs have to win to be considered a dynasty?
Oh boy. So they are, I wish I would have done a little bit more of homework on this game because I'm trying to remember. I know they have two Super Bowl, or sorry, not on this game, on this question. I was too busy wrapped up in my, defensive notes, offensive notes, whiteboards, etc. But, Patrick Mahomes has won 2 Super Bowls. Remind me how many appearances he has in the last
3 in the last 4 years, because they've won the 2. And then remember, they lost to Tampa Bay and Tom Brady in the other one.
Right.
And then the year before last, you had the
AFC
Rams and the Bengals in the Super Bowl. So they've been to 3 of the last 4 Super Bowls. They've won 2 in the last 4 years.
And they've been to 4 straight AFC championships in that stretch as well. So I think if they get one this year, I'll declare it a dynasty. That's 5 straight AFC championships. That's 3 Super Bowls in 5 years and another Super Bowl appearance in that range right now. And listen, they're already borderline dynasty to me as is right now. I think you could almost call them a dynasty knowing that Patrick Mahomes is going to be there pretty much his entire life, I would say, right? Because I would say Patrick Mahomes makes the players around him. Sure, Travis Kelce is great and he helps out Patrick Mahomes, but the majority of those wide receivers are, in and out of the door, right? Like they fluctuate. A lot of guys you really like. Sky Moore is going to play wide receiver tonight. If you could tell me you know what college Sky Moore went to and his background, I'd give you $100 because I don't, right? And so like that's the thing. Their wide receivers irreplaceable with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, and more importantly, with Andy Reid behind being the mastermind behind it, because he's the guy who's drawing up plays and coming up with these concepts. His wide receivers just have to run the route and let Patrick Mahomes do the rest of it. So I just think they're going to be really good for a long time. And I think if they get the Super Bowl this year, I would declare them as a dynasty going for it.
Michael says dynasty is 3 out of 4. Spoken like a Dallas Cowboys fan, Michael, because that's, of course, what Dallas won was 3 out of 4. And that's what I think. I'm trying to think. They would not have 3 out of 4. They would have 3 in 5 years. But the thing is, like, the Patriots were the obvious dynasty because they kept it going for 20 years with Belichick and Brady. But other than them, nobody's done anything close to that. The Chiefs, with their 2 Super Bowls already and 3rd appearance, are really the closest thing they have already. You've got to go back to the Cowboys of the early 90s, the 49ers of the 80s, and the Pittsburgh Steelers of the 70s. The Steelers won, I think it was, I know they won 4, but I think it was in a 6-year stretch that they got their 4. And then the 49ers took them a little bit longer across the decade, but they were definitely dominant. Denver was an AFC dynasty. They won back-to-back in the night, when at the end of Elway. I think I see what Michael's saying. The fact that they've won multiple Super Bowls, but they're also spaced out a little bit more. So I can't go with Denver. I think I agree with what you're saying. I think if the Chiefs win one more, then you call them a dynasty, because there's really no sign as of right now that they're not at least going to get to the AFC Championship game. And they've got the guy who's the best quarterback in the game right now
for a very long time.
I think definitely if they do it this year, you call it a dynasty. But if they don't do it this year, then it depends, because again, you still have to factor in the fact that they've even been in another Super Bowl outside of the 2 that they've won. There's nobody else besides the Patriots who have been to that amount of Super Bowls in that, kind of condensed stretch here in the last 20 plus years, almost 25 years. So I agree. I think they get the 3rd, then you're going to call it a dynasty. Michael says Chiefs 5 straight AFC championship. That's right, because they lost to the Patriots before that as well. 3 Super Bowl appearances and won 2 of those. I mean, that's already
about 6 AFC championships and 3 Super Bowls out of those 6 trips to the AFC championship.
Yep. I mean, that's already bordering on dynasty right there. So I think if they win one more, it's got to be considered a dynasty.
Personally. Did you place any things for the game tonight, or you just
I have not placed anything for the game tonight. I'm going to look at some stuff when we get done. Does it start early tonight, by the way? Is it a 7:30 kick, or like when does it start?
Let's check here real quick. Nope, 8:20.
8:20. All right. So we've still got another hour or so.
I placed a multitude of things for tonight's game, but most of it is kind of like some boosted stuff. I sent you that boost that I think everyone should hop on FanDuel. Patrick Mahomes 50 yards, 225 yards, and 1 touchdown. That's easy money for someone like Patrick Mahomes. He averages about 303 touchdowns in his last 3 opening games to start the season. Something I did for a little lottery or a little fun, because I had a profit boost. I took a Sky Moore touchdown, an Equinemius St. Brown touchdown, Kansas City Chiefs money line, and Patrick Mahomes and Jared Goff to both go for 250 plus. That was a parlay of mine. I boosted it to like plus 1,800, so like $25 wins almost 450 at the end of the day. So
going hard.
That's my lottery ticket for tonight.
Vince would be jealous. You get to bet $25 on something. All right, well, that's going to do it for tonight. And again, IB Countdown to Kickoff. That will we will drop that tomorrow evening. Look for both the YouTube as well as the audio podcast coming out Friday night, since we've got a noon game Saturday. So have a great weekend. Enjoy the game. Hit the like button on your way out. And, of course, subscribe, rate, and review on your podcast platforms. And we will talk to you later on IB Nation Sports Talk.